Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Damn Post. I am your host, Angie Machado. Joined with me, as always, is Jake Hedberg. Hey, Jake, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Angie. How about yourself?
I think my headphones they just cut out. Okay, Jake, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, there you are. Sorry for a quick delay. Jake and I had a catch up before we jumped on. But we have had an amazing first week of camp. 4 full days into everything. This will probably not be a super long podcast because we've seen 4 days without any pads, but enough for us to sit down, do a podcast and talk about what we've seen, who stood out. Some exciting things, Jake. I mean, you've been at practice, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Today was closed to the media. Let's just jump in with the offense first. Actually, before we start there, what have been your overall thoughts now comparing this to the past first days of fall camps? What is the intensity like, and what are your thoughts just overall?
Yeah, I think the team looks a lot deeper. I feel like there were times of last year where once it got to the 2s and the 3s, there was a pretty significant drop-off, and I really don't think you've kind of seen that as much this season. I feel like the team's a lot more well-rounded. I feel like everyone's a lot more focused. Talking to guys like Malik Murphy and Trent Walker and Hiko Taylor after practice on Wednesday, the common mantra was, it's not about me. Like, my goal is to win. And that's something that I think is pretty special. I mean, I think that may have not been it seems like last year that wasn't as much of a focus, but this year it seems like it's all hands on deck to win, 9 or 10 games.
Yeah, that was, we, like you said, Wednesday, we got a chance to kind of sit down and talk to several of the players. And I don't think one person, when we asked them what their goals were, had individual goals.
Yeah.
Hankerson, he has never been to a bowl game, so he wants to just make it to a bowl game. But yeah, they weren't putting, numbers on. They just want to win and get as far as they can. So talk about also the thing that stood out to me too was the competitiveness. We talked to Trent Walker and Malik Murphy about their early rising and trying to beat each other to the facility. That was, like I said, I think that's a Nike ad in the making. I think they said one morning Malik got up at like 3:30 in the morning and they were racing to the facility. So it does seem, I know day one, it's hard to tell, but you've been there and you said that the intensity and then just the knowledge of kind of what Coach Bray expects this year, it's entrenched in these guys.
Yeah, I feel like they're definitely pushing each other every practice, trying to improve as much as they can. The receivers are trying to help the defensive backs get as best as they can. The running backs are trying to help the linebackers get as best as they can. And, the phrase is iron sharpens iron. And, that's what I think is kind of the mantra through camp.
Yeah, let's jump in and talk about kind of the leader of that offense, and that's the quarterbacks. Malik Murphy, it was so fun. Watch Jake, you guys, when Jake's at practice and I'm not, he will send me texts about like what's going on or who looks good or who looked bad or who got injured or whatever. And he was texting me throughout practice, this might be the best practice I've ever seen. And that starts, that was a lot of players, but talk to me about Malik Murphy and the growth you've seen from him, maybe from spring and then through this first week.
Yeah, even from day 1 to day 4, it seemed like all things kind of clicked on Saturday's practice. There was one interception, but that honestly was a good throw. Tyrese Hively just came over and made a great play to pluck a ball out of the air. I wouldn't really attribute that one to Malik. And then, he bounced back and just, he delivered a handful of passes down the field. He hit Bryce Caulfield for a big touchdown. He hit Zach Card for a big touchdown that's been floating around on social media. And overall, he took care of the football. And another thing that kind of caught my eye was he showed the ability to tuck the ball and run. That's something we didn't really see a whole lot last season at Duke. but he kind of showed the ability that he has that. He can.
I don't think he likes to do it though.
I don't think he likes to either,
but I think he can do it.
He will. Yeah, I think that's where I think that's something the Oregon State coaching staff is trying to, implement into him. It's like, hey, if your first 2-3 reads aren't there and you're getting pressured, just tuck the ball and run. Like, don't try and force the ball through a tight squeeze and make a costly mistake. Just tuck the ball, run, pick up 4 or 5 yards, and slide down.
He's a big fella too.
He is. Yeah, I mean, it's a big man. He's he's one of the biggest players on the team, and he's the quarterback.
Big guy, strong. And I'd like to see him run a little bit, but and it's not just him. I mean, I know he's going. I mean, that's QB1 right there. But talk about the growth from Jabari Johnson, and then also newcomer Tristan Tia.
Yeah, Jabari Johnson. He just continues to show the jump from year 2 to 3. He's very precise, very accurate. I mean, he's only put a handful of balls on the ground all practice. He's, and he just got. To me, he's just got like the ability to make stuff happen. Like, there's times he's contested and he throws the ball to funky slot angle, gets the ball out, still completes the pass. It's just a guy who, he just is a dynamic player. He's super talented, and I think he's going to be hard to keep off the field one way or the other. And he's throwing the ball really well. That was kind of his issue last year, was there's kind of problems. I'm sure being injured didn't necessarily help. But then, he looks to be 100%. He's running well. He's throwing well. He looks like a true dual threat QB.
Yeah. And that, you talk about Malik maybe not wanting to run. Sometimes I felt last year that Jabari was first wanted to run. So again, we've talked about this on other pods, but I just see a way. There has to be a way that Oregon State gets both those guys on the field. And then Tristan Tia, I've only saw him day 1, but here's a true freshman coming in, very highly touted young man. I know Greg Biggins with 24/7 loved him and loved his film. The biggest takeaway I saw from him, and it's way too early to anoint him as anything, but I loved the poise I saw from him just early on day 1.
Yeah, I think he's been pretty composed. A lot of freshmen coming in their first, big time football practice, they're nervous, they make 1 or 2 reads and they get all jitterish. But, I think what we've seen from Tristan Tia is, he's going through his first progression to his second, all the way down to his 4th or 5th. And I think that's a great sign to see a young quarterback kind of carry himself that way. Talking to Coach Gunderson after practice, he seems like a very smart kid, a film rat, a film junkie, always trying to improve the knowledge of the game. I do think he kind of needs to put on some size. He's a little bit skinnier than I thought, but, he's 18, 19 years old. He's got plenty of time to develop. Isn't going to be needed to play this year unless stuff goes really, really wrong. But I do feel like the ceiling's pretty high, and Oregon State has potentially found another pretty good QB. Yeah.
I know that the coaching staff loves him and talked about how he's been in with Coach Gunderson like daily, breaking film down and writing down all the plays. In the comments, if you guys are watching this live, make sure to comment. Chater or Oregon said, I heard the slinging was slanging. It definitely was on Saturday. Like I said, when Jake's texting me, it was getting me excited for the practice report that he posted. Good reminder, if you're not a member of BeaverBlitz, now is the time to join, because we are offering a 50% off annual subscription. So that will get you into the lodge to read Jake and Davis, Ty, all the thoughts coming from fall camp. That's why Davis isn't here. He's actually on his way to Corvallis to join us tomorrow. I'll be heading down as well. So definitely a chance to join BeaverBlitz, get an entire year for 50% off. So don't miss out on that. Okay, I'm going to jump to offensive line, because that has been a big topic in the lodge at BeaverBlitz, just with the injuries. It's great to see Jacob Strand back, Tyler Moreno back. Should we be worried that Tyler Volton's not back, or Sikorsky?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about what we expected. I don't think there's reason to panic yet. There's still 3 or 4 weeks till the first game. There's plenty of times for guys to kind of heal up and get back into the swing of things. But overall, I think the unit, there's a lot more stability so far. It seemed like last year there were, up to 8 or 9 guys all throughout practice bounce around the first team. And so far there's been 4 guys at the same spots every time, and then 2 guys switching off at one spot. So it's been pretty nice to see that continuity, because that's what an offensive line really needs, is that constant.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was something that was going to be focused on really heavily by Coach Kavanaugh this offseason. Davis is listening from his car. So Davis, drive safe. So we will see you tomorrow. But yeah, I think there was some, I think what I've heard, now this is what I've heard, is Sikorsky should not be a long-term. And then Bolton was an MCL and an ACL, and that was in September of last year. So, I mean, you're looking at what, 10 to 12 month recovery for that. And then, he's a heavy guy, and he's added some weight. So I think that makes recovery potentially even, potentially a little longer. So, he's well over 300 pounds, and that it's just extra stress. So I have not heard that he is out. So hopefully he can work his way back in, but it is very positive to see those other guys, working their way in and seeing time. Okay. Running backs, a couple of new faces there, but I mean, this is still the Anthony Hankerson show. Talk about a couple of those new faces, though, that have turned your head.
Yeah, I think a guy that's kind of impressed is true freshman Corday Glass. He's broke off a handful of couple runs. I know he was someone that Coach Ford was really, really high on. He's a really good pass catcher as well. We haven't really seen that a whole lot, but he does have that ability as well. It's a pretty loaded room. Might be, tough to get some touches this season, but I think he's a guy Oregon State fans should keep an eye on for the future. And then a guy who's kind of caught my eye this year so far is Cornell Hatcher. He had a really good practice on Saturday. It looks like there's kind of a 3-man battle for that third spot between Marquise Crosby, Jake Reichel, and Cornell Hatcher. Crosby's probably the favorite, but if Cornell Hatcher keeps stringing together practices like he did on Saturday, then he could definitely push for some carries this season. Overall, I feel like this group's really deep, which is kind of a theme for most of the positions outside of, the offensive line and defensive line. Pretty excited about this group. I think Coach Pick's got a lot on his hands trying to manage, 4 or 5 guys to feed. So I'm excited to see how that rotation battle kind of shapes up throughout camp and how it plays into the first game against Cal.
Yeah. In the comments, Santana, Cal cannot come soon enough. I think we all can agree.
Pretty soon. Yeah.
Pretty soon. And then Joe Swaim in the comments says, Reichel feels like he could be a Jack Coletto type. I agree with that. He's kind of that bigger body, kind of fullback kind of size. I can attest, last week we talked about Salahadin Allah and the weight he added. Definitely looked bigger and stronger. Yeah, especially in that lower trunk. He just looked bigger, stronger. So yeah, that room is pretty loaded. Like you said, it's kind of fun to see Cornell Hatcher kind of emerging as a guy to watch. We've talked, and how about, so wide receivers. This has been another topic in the Lodge. I know, very deep. There's a lot of guys there, but a new coach, and I think a lot of people are kind of curious on what Coach McCann is doing with that room, and if you can see that potentially they'll be making better progress as, getting separation and catching the ball. Yeah.
They've been doing a lot of work, running routes and, kind of reading defenses to, create that separation. I think it's a group that's going to be better because they're a lot deeper as well. I feel like last year was kind of Trent Walker's show, and then, Darius Clemens would pop a good game, Taz Reddick would pop a good game, but no one really stood out as that consistent number 2 and number 3 guy. I think having an improved quarterback play will also help that as well. But, there's, you got Clemens, Taz Reddick, a guy that's kind of stood out is Malachi Durant. I know a lot of Oregon State fans have been pretty excited about him. He's having a pretty good fall so far. Zachary Card, as most of the fans know, is a bona fide deep threat. He can go out and catch the ball and outrun anybody. Same with David Wells. Those guys haven't seen a whole lot of David Wells. I think he's kind of been battling a minor injury, but Card, he had a pretty big play on Saturday. And then haven't seen Jimmy Valson yet, but I believe he should be relatively close. So that'll just kind of add another guy to that stable. So excited to see how kind of the rotation plays out behind Trent, Darius, and Taz look like the pretty clear top 3 right now, but it'll be interesting to see if Durant could kind of break through and get some time, or if Hart and Wells stay ahead, and what role Jimmy Valson plays as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Jimmy Valson should be, and he was, before his injury, he was really starting to emerge too. So
Yeah.
has some time off, but hopefully he can come back and then stay healthy and make a contribution. Tight ends is another area I think we're going to see more of in Ryan Gunderson's offense. Bryce Caulfield is kind of quietly stringing together a solid spring and now an early start to fall. What are your thoughts on the tight ends?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a pretty deep group. They've got 4 guys, I think, that are going to see time this year. Caulfield's a guy, he came in at like 220. He's up to 245 for his senior season. So he's a guy who's put on a lot of weight. He physically looks like the part. What we've kind of seen, particularly on Saturday's practice, was, it looked like there was more inflammation of the running backs and tight ends in the passing game, which is something we didn't see a whole lot of last season. Both Caulfield and Riley had big touchdown catches on practice at Saturday. And I think outside of them, you can expect to see Cooper Jensen. You can expect to see Jackson Bowers as well. So you can see a handful of guys that Coach Heck should be able to mix and match throughout the game. And I think having the ability to keep guys fresh is huge.
So overall in the offense, do you think this offense is more balanced this year under Coach Gunderson?
For sure.
Okay, yeah.
For sure. I didn't feel like there was a ton of passing threat last season. And now not only do you have a passing threat with the receivers, I feel like you have, like we just touched on, a handful of tight ends that you can trust in the passing game. You have some running backs you can trust in the passing game. I think it's going to be a lot more of a two-dimensional offense, whereas, last year, the first half of the season, first 2/3 of the season, it felt like a run-heavy team, and you couldn't really throw the ball. I don't expect that to be the case this season. I expect to be a lot more balanced. And
as we've said, Malik Murphy has an arm.
Yeah.
At cannon. So, and I think we were missing that last season.
Yeah, there wasn't really any downfield threat at all last season, and now it appears that it's significantly.
And when you're one-dimensional, it makes a defense's job 1,000% easier. So, it should be fun. And like I said, new faces on that coaching staff. With Pickering, McCann, Kavanaugh. Heck, gosh, it's like an entire new crew in there.
Yeah.
And then a familiar face with Danny Langsdorff helping out, just another set of eyes helping that quarterback room. Switching sides, another area that really kind of saw some upheaval, but I think in a good way, in that Coach Bray is coming back to be a defensive coordinator and kind of run that defense. Early take, 4 days in, has the Beaver defense got their swagger back?
Yeah, I think they do. They're flying around a lot more. I feel like, the blitzing's a lot more what we kind of saw under Trent Bray. It's a lot more aggressive. I feel like that's the right word to describe it. I kind of feel like it fits Coach Bray's fiery personality. I feel like it's a fiery defense. They're not going to shy away from anyone. And I feel like it's a group that, like, the offense is a lot deeper than last season. It's a lot more talented than last season. Having full pads come on, I believe they should come on. I think they might have come on today, actually.
Today, yeah.
Having that come on will kind of allow us to get a better glimpse of how physical they are, because, in shows you can only do so much, and that's why it's kind of been tougher to get a read with the offensive and defensive lines. But I feel like once the pads come on, we'll be able to get a much better read.
Yeah, so for those that kind of just are joining in, today was a closed practice. Sunday they have off, so Sundays are off days for the team. They're still at the facility watching film and meeting with coaches and position groups. But Monday is media is locked out, but we will be back tomorrow to get a better look at, now with pads on. D-line, how have they done? What are the early returns on that defensive front?
Yeah, again, it's kind of a little too early to tell with the pads not fully on, but I think a guy who's going to turn a lot of heads this year and surprise some people is Tavita Pomea. He kind of had issues staying on the field for more than 2 or 3 snaps last year at 330 pounds, dropped down to 310, and he looks quick. He's a guy who's shifty. He moves pretty well. Pairing that with Thomas Collins, who's, the smaller, bit more explosive, really good pass rusher. I think those guys are pretty clearly Oregon State's top 2 up front right now. And then I think with you got a guy like Jacob Schuster at 345, 335 pounds can come in and plug the middle. Add guys like JoJo Johnson, who can kind of come in and spell Schuster, spell Collins or Pomea as needed. And I think it's a group that should be improved. We still need to see it with the pads coming on, but the early signs have been promising.
Yeah, and JoJo Johnson was one that we talked about last week. I know the end of spring, his name kept popping up, so I do think he is one to watch. And I agree with you on the Pomea. That I think cutting a little bit of the weight, he looks a little faster, and then just the comfort level.
Yeah,
and we talked about this last week too. All those injuries last year. Yes, it was horrible going through it, but now we have an entire defense that has some playing experience. Some young guys that are ready to go. Rushing the passer was obviously a something that Oregon State struggled with. How are those outside linebackers looking?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty deep group. There's a handful of guys we haven't seen yet. Takari Hickles, Akai Asai kind of come to mind. Both expected to be back relatively soon, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. It's a group that's got some depth. Nico Taylor's pretty clearly that top dog. It looks like Kai Wallens kind of separated himself and cemented himself as the other starter. But beyond that, you got Shamar Michael, you got Walker Harris, you got Andy Alfieri. It's a group that Oregon State is going to be able to rotate a whole lot and keep fresh. Taylor's gotten in the backfield a couple times so far this fall. Shamar Michael had a handful of big plays on Saturday's scrimmage. Overall, I think it's a group that Oregon State can expect to be a lot better. I think part of that is having the secondary improved and the interior presence improved, because that kind of allows the outside linebackers some more one-on-one opportunities, and it gives them a lot more time to get to the passer.
Another area that I think is going to be a big improvement for Oregon State this year is inside backer. Dexter Foster looks the part now. He looked a little light last year as a freshman. He looks the part now. What are you seeing from that group? I mean, you got Dexter Foster. What you have Rajon Davis, Micaiah Tongue,
and then Aiden Sullivan as well.
That's right, Aiden Sullivan.
Pretty clear top four. Yeah, I think it's a pretty physical group. Dexter Foster physically looks he looks like an NFL linebacker already. I mean, 6'3", 235 pounds, and he's only going to get bigger. Yeah, he's long. He still looks to carry himself and move pretty well, which is always a promising thing. Outside of that, I think you're going to see all three of those guys kind of rotate in next to Foster. I think Micaiah Tongue and Davis are kind of the two guys they're looking at the starting spot, with Sullivan as more of a rotational piece. But, Tongue, he's an incredible story, coming off of that, just really bad knee injury that I think he tore 4 or 5 things. He's got a big brace on, but he still looks to move pretty well. He also has that ability as a former receiver to kind of read offenses a little bit easier. So I think he'll be Oregon State's best coverage linebacker. And I'm excited to see how this group kind of pushes each other, and how that competition kind of builds them up and plays out the rest of the camp.
Yeah, they've been impressive. And then last, let's talk some secondary. Deep group, maybe some hits here, with the quarterbacks. Don't know how, what's going to shake out there, but what are you seeing from that defensive back group as a whole? Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of versatility. There's a handful of guys they've, bounced from corner to safety, from safety to nickel, from corner to nickel. Guys like Tyrese Ivy's played safety and nickel. Cy Fedrawli's played cornerback and nickel. Kobe Singleton's played corner and nickel. You got guys like Mason White and Amarian York have played safety and nickel. Ty Hopper as well. So having that flexibility and the versatility to kind of move pieces around and get your 5 best guys on the field is huge, because you never know when a guy could go down. You never know when something out of your control happens, and that's it's good to have that ability to kind of bump a guy from corner to nickel. And I think getting a guy like Noble Thomas back pretty soon as well will help add to that, because Oregon State could afford to bump Cy Raleigh to cornerback. They could bump him to safety, and then they could stick Thomas in at nickel. they could put both of them at corner and have Tyrese come down and play nickel. There's just a handful of things. And I think what they're doing right now is kind of evaluating their best way to get those 5 best guys out and onto the field.
Yeah. I think, and like you said, that versatility, I know that was something that, Coach Bray's done that. Coach Hayward believed in that.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Chance believes in that as well, the kind of cross-training guys and being, able to. I'm just looking through some comments right now. Go back to Micaiah Tongue. Brian Miller says, I told my mom, who's been an RN for almost 40 years, about Tongue's injury. Even she said, damn, how will he come back?
Yeah.
Been a good story. He's worked really hard. Joe Swaim asked, did Steven Jackson's son redshirt? No, we don't know about redshirts yet. Let that play out. So, but he's with the team, he's practicing. So it's a deep room. He's got some work cut out for him. Okay, tell me. So Amari and York's actually kind of popped a few times when I've been to practice. But how about Jaheim Patterson? Because that was one of the games last season that I was really excited about. Mm-hmm. How's he looking?
Yeah, he's looking well. He came on strong towards the end of last season. I think a lot of Oregon State fans are kind of questioning why he didn't play more, earlier in the season. And, I remember Coach Bray talking about him after in a press conference after, I want to say, the Cal game or something. He was saying, like, yeah, he's a guy that we've wanted to get on the field. So he's a guy who I think is going to see a lot more time this year. He's kind of competing for that second safety role next to Skylar Thomas with Tyrese. I think personally what's going to happen is Tyrese Ivory's probably going to bump down to nickel, and they're going to get Jaheim back there at safety, and that's an imposing back end with Skylar Thomas. He's a big guy, probably 6'3", 225, and then you got Jaheim Patterson at 6'4". Those are some big safeties that are fluid. They run well, they communicate well. He's looking very solid. I think he's started to build on the momentum he created in the spring, and he's carried that over. And I think Oregon State fans should be pretty excited about what Jaheim Patterson's going to bring to the table.
Yeah, lots and lots of options there. We're going to take, for the podcast, we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, just a reminder that BeaverBlitz.com is the place to be for all your in-depth practice reports, recruiting coverage, and everything throughout the season. But right now is definitely the time to be in the lodge and reading all of Jake's practice reports. We are offering a 50% off fall camp promo right now, so you can get in for a full year. I think it's works out to $60 for the year. Super good deal. Take advantage. Don't miss out, because this is a really screaming deal to get you in the full year. We'll be right back to take some damn questions. If you have any questions and you're watching live, make sure to pop those in the comments, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, welcome back for the second half of the damn podcast. We have just talked first 4 days of fall camp, first week. We have broke down the offense, who stood out, the defense, who's looked good. One thing we didn't talk about, Jake, and this is our very first damn question from Blodgett Beavers. How is the kicking game looking?
Yeah, I completely blanked and forgot to put it in my practice report on Saturday, but we saw them kick the first time. Caleb Ojeda, he kind of looks like the favorite, only healthy kicker as well. His first kick from 38, he missed, but then he drilled a 38-yarder, drilled a 43-yarder, and drilled a 48-yarder. I believe may have even hit a 53 in there as well. So, the first kick was a little shaky. After that, kind of bounced back and recovered. And, that's kind of a thing where we're not going to know until we get into a game. It's a big thing. Kicking, it's a big difference, kicking in practice in front of, your teammates and coaches, and then going out and kicking in front of 35,000 people, 40,000 people on a Saturday. So we'll find out. It was promising to see those longer kicks get hit. The punt game looks to be a battle between Max Walker and AJ Windsor. Talking to Coach Christian after practice on Saturday, it looks like that's kind of a competition that's going to go down to first week of fall camp. So we'll see how that plays out. But there's a lot of questions just because we haven't really seen any of these guys yet. So, it looks good, but there's no real way to find out until the lights come on. And
kicking is such a strange thing because, end of the day, all these guys can kick, right? They wouldn't be here if they couldn't kick. But kicking's such a mental thing. And like you said, how are they going to handle when the game's on the line and there's 35,000 people. So we'll keep watching for that as practice goes on. Kickers usually go and do their own thing, though. So they might call them in at the beginning to do a little bit of punch work. They might call them in later to in practice and see if they can hit a 50-yarder. But after that, they kind of go do their own thing. Let's see. We have Chater OR, Kai Wallen, Rajon Davis, Trey Glasper. What's your feel on those guys?
Yeah, I mean, they're all guys that are pushing for starting roles. We've seen all of them work with the first team so far. Trey Glasper's taken the majority of reps with the first team corners. I think not only is he a true freshman that's a lock for playing time, I think he's a guy who's going to start, which is interesting. Throwing out a true freshman's a little bit scary, but he hasn't given us a reason to kind of to doubt him yet. He's an explosive kid. He was a hell of a receiver as well. Oregon State's had a pretty good stretch of true freshman corners. He should be next in line. Excited to see him kind of get into an actual game and see how it translates from practice to a Saturday. But the early impressions are very positive.
Okay. Squeaky Clean in the chat says Murphy will be the best QB since insert name. Luton, DJ, DA. Just how good do you think he can be?
I'm impartial to Jake Luton, actually. I'm a lot higher on him than a lot of people are. I actually think he's, in terms of pure quarterback, I think he was a better quarterback than Sean Mannion, which I know is kind of might be a little head.
I would agree, probably.
Because, if you put Jake Luton with Cooks and if you look at Sean Mannion, his one season without Cooks and Wheaton, not great. I think if you
actually go back further to Matt Moore. I think still Matt Moore's last season was, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think he's going to be better than DJ,
okay.
Better than Giovanni, better than Chance, better than Gulbranson. If he can, I think a lot of Beaver fans in general kind of undervalue how good Jake Luton was. He had 28 touchdowns and 3 picks his last season.
Yeah.
If we could get that out of Malik Murphy, that'd be ecstatic. If we get that out of a quarterback again, that'd be pretty exciting. I think if he can put up a season similar to that, then I would be thrilled.
Okay. Reeser Beeve 23 in the lodge says, who is the defensive lineman who could be an impact player in 25?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit, but Tavita Pomea. I think Thomas Collins is a guy that that a lot of Beaver fans kind of know more and is a bigger name, but I think Tavita Pomea is going to be a guy that kind of surprises them. The early impressions have been fantastic. He's the guy who looks like one of the best, if not the best, defensive lineman on the team. So excited to see how that translates to games. It's a whole different animal going from practice to games, but he looks better, staying on the field a lot better, which are two major factors, and looks promising.
Perfect. Okay, Go Beavs 2 Chummer says, what is your prediction for the starting 5 offensive line August 30th?
I think health is key.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the center with Van Wells, about the only position 100% set in stone. I feel like right now how it looks, your tackles are pretty locked in based off what we've seen with Jacob Strand and Tyler Morano. Excuse me. Guards, I feel like if Volton's back, he should be. But at this point, I'm a little unsure if he'll be back by game 1. I think if Sikorsky's back, he'll be back by – if Sikorsky's back, I think he'll start again. Don't know for sure if he will be. But if they can't go, I think Nathan Elu will start at one of the guard spots. And then the other guard spot, I think Jacob Anderson will take that spot as things stand. It's been 4 practices. We could come out on practice and half those guys are with the second team, and that wouldn't be a shock. So way too early. I think outside of Van Wells, nothing is certain in that 5. But if I had to guess based off what I've seen the first 4 practices, that's what I would go with. And
then DeVary's update on the O-line. I think we've actually talked a lot about the O-line today on the pod. So that should get you. Okay, here, Mr. G. Gray. Who deserves the most credit for the advancement of the offense from this point last season? Gundy, Malik, or someone else?
I feel like that's a tough question because, I feel like a lot of what Gundy wanted to do, he couldn't last year because of having a quarterback. So I guess you lean Malik Murphy, but I think Gundy's also getting the best out of him. So it's really a combination of the two. It's a tough question to answer because, it's not just a quarterback. It's not just an offensive coordinator. To have a successful offense, you need the two to be in tune and really just act as one. So it is a little bit tougher to kind of gauge that question because in my mind, you kind of have to view if you want to have a successful offense, the offensive coordinator and quarterback have to be kind of viewed as one.
So overall thoughts, are you surprised by what we've seen the first 4 days? Are you disappointed? What are your kind of just overriding thoughts?
Yeah, the first couple of days was kind of what I expected. And then Saturday happened and, the offense really it got me excited. Having the ability to push the ball downfield, it was one big play after one big play after one big play. And that's something that has been, lacking. We haven't seen that in a while. And it was positive to see that. It wasn't just a pass game either. Cornell Hatch had a few nice runs. Hankerson, as always, broke a few nice runs. Jake Reichel even had a pretty solid run. So it's really just that has been very pleasant. I'm hopeful that can kind of carry over. And then again, it is a little bit tougher to gauge without the pads on. So that's kind of why I'm a little hesitant to get too excited. But the offensive line hasn't been terrible.
Okay.
That was a big question mark.
That was, maybe the biggest question mark.
Yeah, I think they've held their own, and I think that speaks to how good of a coach Cav is. There really hasn't been a whole lot of sacks. There's been maybe one or two each practice, which is, not unnormal. These guys go up against each other. Stuff happens. It gets concerning when there's 5 or 6 sacks practice. That's when there's a real issue. That's what we kind of saw in the spring. Looks a lot better in the fall. And, I'm attesting that to, having Coach Cav and, kind of learning his system some more rather than unproductiveness from the outside backers. But having that offensive line play be the way it has been a promising sign. You'd like it to grow throughout camp and continue to evolve. But the early impressions have been very promising.
I kind of wish that we could have just been a fly on the wall today at practice because with the amount of big plays that were given up on Saturday, the defense had to come out and be.
Yeah, I would imagine the defense was pretty fiery today.
Yeah. We haven't even seen any little scuffles yet. We have not had our first fall camp scuffle.
There was one.
Oh, was there one? Okay.
Yeah.
Usually, when the pads come on, there'll be a couple. But
there was one on Friday.
Chater OR, is this the best wide receiver room we've had since Brandon Cooks left? Trent Walker is massively underrated, especially with what he did last year on a limited passing team.
I think we need to see it first. It's been, I think, I think Oregon State's passing room in 22. I mean, you have Anthony Gould, Silas Bolden, Trayshawn Harrison, Tyjon Lindsey. You have Trent Walker in that room even.
Yeah.
I think that one's probably, we just haven't seen it yet. I think it's got the potential to be, but until we kind of go out there and see them play against another team, I think the room with Isaiah Hodgins in 2019 was top heavy, but, Isaiah is something Oregon State hasn't had in a while with his red zone presence and stuff. We'll see. I think it could.
Squeaky Clean in the comments asked that earlier. Will OSU have their first 1,000-yard receiver since Hodgins?
We'll see. I think it's going to be a lot more balanced this season. I think Oregon State's not going to have one guy with 900 yards, then 3 guys with 250, 206 yards. I think it'll be more kind of how it was the year when the Beavers had Trevon Bradford, Isaiah Hodgins, and Timmy Hernandez, where they had like 3 guys at like the 700-800 yard range. Because I think Oregon State's going to have the ability to spread the ball out a lot more. I do feel like if someone does, I feel like Trent Walker is the most likely candidate of that group to push for that. And I wouldn't be shocked if he did. I just feel like Oregon State's still going to run the ball enough to where the targets aren't going to be at the point where, with the 3 guys that Oregon State has paired with the running game, I don't think there's going to be a possibility for a guy to have 1,000 yards because I think everyone's going to get the ball in their hands. Okay,
you heard it here, guys. We are going to cut this one a little short. Jake has has the night off tonight. And then tomorrow, the whole BeaverBlitz team will be there tomorrow to bring you practice reports from Pro Throw Field. Jake, thank you for your time tonight.
Anytime.
And all you're doing in the lodge at BeaverBlitz, again, 50% off promo is running right now. And we will be back next week for another episode of the Damn Podcast.